Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context here, and this time we are talking about the long-awaited rework to Black Panther Civil War. So, bit of a story time here. Um, this was the very first project I started when I got hired at Kabam. So that was, for those of you keeping track, over 2 years ago now. I was hired officially in July 2022, and after some brief onboarding, I started practicing both design and coding by tackling literally this rework even before I got started on Absorbing Man, who was my first character. For a variety of reasons we don't need to really go into, it didn't get shipped until now. There have been changes. I'm not going to pretend that this was just ready to go on the shelf for 2 years. That's not my point. But I have a deep attachment to this project because of that. It's been a long time coming for me, and I care about it quite a bit. So, funnily enough, you're going to notice some similarities in this kit to things that happened later despite its age. That's kind of just a happy accident. Like, there are things in here that ask you to parry specials, which you might now associate with Iron Man's rework. This is older than Iron Man's rework, but I think we took inspiration from the same place, which is how much fun both Iron Man's designer and myself find Guardian's playstyle for that. That kind of thing. But the core of what I was trying to do here was take that thematic element of his suit storing up damage and then unleashing it, which was there in the original design, and make it something you as the player could control and actively, intelligently use on offense, as well as just kind of update his defensive threat, and that's how we got here. So, touching on the champion attributes, we're not going to go over base stats other than to just note he does have one of the largest health pools in the skill class in particular, and that does have some advantages. I did retune his PI, so it is better, but it's not particularly exceptional. But yeah, the attributes, survivability of 3, like we just said, big health pool. A little bit higher than average armor, but that's pretty much what's going on here, right? There's also some physical resistance in the SIG, but for the most part, what's protecting him is just the ability to literally take more damage. Pretty average. Damage of 4, he's tuned pretty specifically around short fights, I'm not going to lie. The damage is solid in longer fights, but he is designed to burst down an opponent quickly. You'll see that with the design of his SIG ability, as we'll get to. And so he can do a ton of damage really quickly and then kind of needs to recharge. I felt that was also thematic. Ease of use 2.5, as is what I normally aim for. You can get okay results out of this character, just kind of doing combos after your parries, throw specials. The things will work, right? So that kind of puts a floor on the ease of use, or sorry, a ceiling on the ease of use score, so to speak. But the upper level of expression here is pretty complicated, right? Managing the pauses that you see in this kit, parrying a lot, particularly parrying specials as much as you possibly can, juggling your resources, and then choosing the correct moment to cash them out to do the most damage possible. There is some real complexity here, and we'll get to that as we go. Utility of 2, the utility is pretty light on this character. He has really good access to cleanse, and that's it for the most part. Like, there are some offensive uses of the stun reflect. There are some things that ask you for bleed damage, and he has that, but for the most part, it's the cleanse. And then defender strength of 3.5. As I alluded to earlier, he has mostly the same defender threats, but we've kind of updated them for the modern game and what class identities are now, which, if you haven't already guessed it, means there are no more armor ups. So that is gone, but there are other ways to control things that we added because of that. Getting into strengths and weaknesses. You will remember that there is burst damage in this kit. We have made it a lot bigger and better. There is still the stun reflect that you may be familiar with. If you try to stun him specifically with a contact attack, then he's going to throw that back at you. And now, when he does that, he gets free charges, and so it's going to hurt. And then lastly, bleed. He doesn't have a lot of bleeds necessarily. He doesn't have access to as many individual bleeds as classic Black Panther or somebody like Chilth, but they get charged up now by his reflect charges, and so he has access to some of the largest bleeds in the game. They do very, very real damage. Weaknesses, he wants to parry, so opponents that punish you for parrying or that are unblockable so you just can't parry are a serious problem. Bleed immunity slows him down and may cause you to need to recharge, which, as we talked about, is a pretty big ask. But he still does damage through bleed immunity if you're not as concerned about speed. And then tempo disruption. Like we said, there are pauses and resources to juggle in this kit. If you get thrown off of that, you can lose it all, and that's not super fun. So getting into the abilities themselves, we start off with the Reflective Matrix. Note that this is no longer reflective armor. It was never an armor up, it just keyed off of armors, so calling it armor was confusing. We no longer are. So he starts each fight with Reflective Matrix active. It increases his critical resistance by a small amount for 10 seconds. That is the built-in effect of it. The goal for this is not to make him absurdly tanky, but basically to, if you get hit, which is going to give you reflect charges, we want to mitigate the possibility of you just getting one shot by a big yellow number. We want those numbers to be smaller and more controlled for you to then throw that damage back at your opponent. Additionally, Reflective Matrix is paused during the opponent's specials. While it's active, Black Panther also gains block penetration when striking into the opponent's block, unless those blocks are well timed. So the idea here is that you can parry him just fine and not suffer any extra block damage, but we're going to get to the fact that there is, at least sometimes, a risk to parrying him if you don't have a counter for that. So just writing out block and baiting heavy is going to have some chip damage attached to it. Now, here's the rephrase stun reflect. When Black Panther is inflicted with a stun debuff, while making contact with the opponent, meaning either he or the opponent is landing a contact attack, he consumes Reflective Matrix to purify that stun. So he does have to be able to purify. Somebody like Apocalypse or Mr. Sinister can turn that off. Then, if he is not passively stunned, and the opponent's not performing a special attack, he inflicts a stun debuff on the opponent. That first part there is the new clause that we have added, so if you're using somebody like Storm or Bishop, who replaces a purified stun debuff from the parry mastery with a passive stun, Black Panther won't reflect that stun on you anymore. The way it used to work was he would reflect it, you would both be stunned, it was funny, then the fight would resume. But now he just doesn't stun you at all. You don't have to worry about that. That is an explicit counter to this mechanic. And note that he does consume the Reflective Matrix when this happens. So once you've disarmed it, you are good to go. So there is counterplay here. It's just different counterplay than what used to exist. When Reflective Matrix ends, it goes on cooldown for 10 seconds and then reactivates the next time he's struck or blocks. But this cooldown is decreased by up to 50% based on missing health. So as you're trying to close out a fight against him on defense, it is going to come back faster and faster. Now, Reflect charges, which max out at 75, you gain these while Reflective Matrix is active. They last for 12 seconds now, that's a bit longer. They are paused during either champion special attacks, and they can be refreshed by dodging back after landing a non-combo ending attack. So, medium 1, lights 1, 2, and 3, any of those you dash back, they'll refresh. So this gameplay should remind you of classic Black Panther. It's pretty flexible. It makes it easy to hold on to your reflect charges. I also find it introduces some choice here where you're balancing how much power you're building towards your specials by landing more hits versus how short your combos are to refresh as much as possible. So you gain 1 charge for every chunk of health lost from being struck or blocking an attack. I want to note that this is actually different. It used to be you got 1 charge for every 1% of your max health. Now it's 1 charge for every 2% of your max health. And that's just because you have so many other sources of these that we kind of had to tune down that passive gain. It also makes him a little bit less threatening as a defender because, again, we added more sources there. It balances out in the gameplay, and you definitely have access to more charges, but just want to shout that technically that source has gone down. The main way that I expect you as an attacker to gain these charges, though, is by parrying. So you gain 3 charges when either champion performs a well-timed block, plus 5 additional charges if blocking a special, or if Black Panther's defending. This does have a small cooldown, so if you parry 2 hits in rapid succession, like Cyclops beams, you will only get those 8 charges once, rather than 16. So the way this works is that oftentimes you're going to parry, do an incomplete combo, dash back, parry again, do an incomplete combo, and you'll just keep ramping those. And as you're giving the opponent specials, you try to parry those specials, and whenever you do that, you get 8 instead of 3. And note that this happens whenever either champion performs a well-timed block. So this is what I was alluding to earlier. If you trigger his stun reflect by parrying him, that's going to give him 8 charges. And so then when he hits you, those 8 charges are going to cash out, and it's going to hurt. So lastly in this section, as an attacker, Reflective Matrix pauses for up to 10 seconds whenever he gains a reflect charge, reduced by 0.2 seconds for each active charge. So what this means is that once you hit 50 charges, you stop getting this pause. On the way there, this pause helps you keep gaining charges, keep your matrix paused, and keep ramping. Once you're at 50, you can keep ramping, but the matrix might expire, at which point you lose the ability to dodge back and refresh your charges, so you're playing with fire a little bit in between 50 and 75. Sometimes that's worth it, especially if you're gaining charges right at the end there by parrying special attacks and can then cash them out, but that's the tension that you're going to have to play with. Like I mentioned earlier, the core of this rework was to give the player more control. I didn't want the only way that you could charge up this cool attack to be losing health. So now, you parry things, you parry specials in particular, you get things that way. Now the reason you care about this is Kinetic Burst. He can unleash these stored reflect charges as a Kinetic Burst, dealing this much direct damage for each charge. This damage does scale with base health. It's still based off of 1% of his max health, so the same value that it used to have. Just pointing out that difference because this stayed the same, even as the charge gain from lost health changed. And then this damage is reduced by 20% against mutant champions. It is direct damage. We had to have a bit of a nod towards class advantage there. So as a defender, you have that familiar payout. He deals a Kinetic Burst whenever he strikes the opponent while reflect charges are active. So you stun him, he purifies the stun, reflects it onto you, gains 8 charges because a defending Black Panther got parried, he hits you, he deals 8% of his max health as direct damage. It hurts. But when he's not a defender, you now have more choices. So your default payout is the final hit of the special 2. This just deals a Kinetic Burst. You get 1 dose of that damage as long as you throw a special 2. Like I said, this is the easy version. You just go for the special 2, guaranteed damage. But if you want to do something a little more complicated, you can also throw a heavy attack and cancel that into a special, because each hit of a heavy or of a special activated during a heavy also deals a Kinetic Burst. This means that if you heavy attack, you get 2 bursts, that damage twice. If you heavy cancel into a special 1, you get 3, because it's the first hit of the heavy and then both hits of the special 1. If you heavy cancel into a special 2, you get 4 bursts. First hit of the heavy, all 3 hits of the special 2. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to build up these charges with parries and with parries of specials in particular, and then I want you to heavy cancel into special attacks and throw a bunch of big red numbers at your opponent. Now, after an attack that deals 1 or more kinetic bursts, remove all charges and consume Reflective Matrix, and then you reduce its cooldown by up to 50% based on the remaining duration. So if you were able to hold on to almost all of its duration as you were building up charges and cash it out really efficiently, then you will get it back sooner. But you're going to have to wait at least 5 seconds before you can start building resources again. Now, Special 1, this is the source of cleanse. You get 4 cleanse passives on activation. These can't remove stun debuffs because I still want this stun reflect to be the way that you interact with that, but they do last for 24 seconds. You can come close to being stun immune this way. Enough debuffs will eventually overwhelm it, but this is a really powerful tool. It kind of comes close to how Shang-Chi works with managing debuffs. I find it pretty helpful, and obviously it makes him a very good Jessica Jones counter if you are in the market for that. Additionally, you're going to gain 4 reflect charges on each of the 2 hits when they either land the opponent or strike into their block, so you can ramp with this. If you need the cleanses, then I recommend just throwing the Special 1. You will do less damage for reasons we get to, but it will keep ramping your reflect charges, it will keep those cleanses up. This is a viable, slower method of playing the character. You can also potentially throw the Special 1 to try and ramp these guaranteed reflect charges if you're having trouble parrying the opponent, and then try and use the Special 2. You're also going to get some bleed debuffs on each of those hits. These are pretty small, calm bleeds, but if you need access to the bleeds to deal damage for certain nodes or whatever, this does give you that guaranteed access. And then the Special 2 is your cash out. Each hit inflicts a bleed debuff. These are significantly stronger bleeds and also shorter ones, so automatically you're going to see larger red numbers, and the bleed debuffs gain extra potency for each reflect charge. As a reminder, the kit is balanced around you having somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 of these, meaning that these bleeds can be around 5 to 6 times as strong as they are listed here. Plus, if you're heavy canceling into this, you're getting that burst of direct damage on each hit as well as the bleeds. The Special 2 melts things. It doesn't have the utility of the Special 1, but it feels really good. Very, very happy with how that played out. And then the Special 3 is a fairly standard easy button. You're going to get Reflective Matrix online, pause it for a full 20 seconds. Its base duration, as a reminder, is 10 seconds, so this is 30 seconds of guaranteed uptime if you don't consume it before the end of that. That's going to make it a lot easier to hold on to your reflect charges. And you're going to go ahead and gain 10 of those charges and refresh them. So if you're having trouble against the opponent, but you still want to use Black Panther and you want to build up to one of those cash outs, here you go. And then the signature ability has been reworked a bit. The most important part is this first line here. Black Panther starts each fight with up to 20 reflect charges. That's going to get you a lot closer to 50 for your first Special 2 and is huge for his speed in Battlegrounds. Second, an upgraded Reflective Matrix grants up to 30% physical resistance. That's a fair amount of physical resistance and makes him feel a lot tankier while he's, parrying the opponent a lot and ramping up. And then while he has at least 10 reflect charges, he gets up to 100% chance to absorb heavy attack impacts by consuming 10 of those charges to become passively unstoppable. This is recognizable from the old kit, but it now scales off of reflect charges instead of armor ups, and it does max out at 100% chance. be careful heavy spamming against him, you may get hit in the face. And then moving on to synergies. We now do have a unique one here with a coming soon character. That'll be revealed later. But when Black Panther's blocking special attacks, the window in which reflect charges can be gained is increased, so your timing is more generous, and there's no cooldown. What this basically means is that you can go full Guardian, you can parry somebody like Cyclops and get credit for all 3 hits pretty easily, whereas before you would have gotten 1. So that's really nice for ramping quickly, does require the synergy. And then there are also some changes to incoming synergies to reflect his new kit. Tigra now gives him an additional cleanse passive. Killmonger still gives Furies on well-timed blocks, but these are no longer stacking, because that would have been insane with his special too. But they are passive as a trade-off. Hulkbuster allows reflect charges to last longer, makes your loop a little bit easier. And then Iron Man Infinity War. This synergy had gotten really weird because it was scaling off armor-up effects, and neither Killmonger didn't have armor, Black Panther had armor-up buffs, but no longer does. We just made this a flat amount of critical resistance at all times now. That'll be fine. And yeah, that's Black Panther. Obviously, run deep wounds with him. The special 2 bleeds are a lot more important. They're relatively short. They get boosted quite a bit by max deep wounds. I really hope y'all enjoy him. Like I said, this rework has a special place in my heart because it was the first real project I started on at Kabam, and I'm really glad that I got to see it over the finish line. I have arguably worked too hard over the past few months to make sure that I could be the one on this, as well as doing my other characters, but I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I hope y'all will be too. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking, and until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.